middle to make the marker. All right, so here we go, playing Dreamin' of D&D as submitted by Shorty, and I look like I'm also joined by Ram. So hello, welcome to the stream.
Thank you.
Oh,
So if you can each just introduce yourselves real quick and let me know what your role on the project was.
yeah,
Um,
sure. So I'm Shorty. I was the main programmer on this project.
mhm.
Mostly did all the programming. Got a little bit of help from Ram here and there with some stuff, but for the most part, main programmer. So basically, if something's broken, it's my fault.
That's all good. And Ram?
Yeah, so obviously I'm Bram, and I was the main level designer and art director, though we used a lot of pre-built assets because of the time. So yeah.
All right. We're hearing the voice lines play out now. Here, I'll turn that up a bit. Was that it? Just the like, where am I?
uh,
Oh no,
the
here,
vo-
here.
the main audio guy was Joker, by the way, but unfortunately he couldn't make it this morning.
Okay.
My stupid D&D dice. What? The dice came back? They must be imbued with the powers of Tamora, the god of luck. I'm saved!
So how many voice lines are there throughout the game?
Oh, that is a good question.
A little over a dozen,
There's
maybe.
Yeah, there's about 3 or 4 random ones that Silas will say, and then 3 or 4 random ones that the goblins, orcs, whatever they are, will say.
Okay.
And then we just have the random like sound effects, like hit effects, and the
Mhm.
dice rolls, and all that sort of stuff too.
Come on. Okay.
Stupid goblin's dead. Where am
I feel like that sword would be way more effective than what I'm using right now.
Yeah.
But no, let's go with the chuck and D4s. All right. So, how did you decide on like making this? What was the inspiration behind this game?
Well, that's a good question. So we've all played some sort of D&D before, so we thought that
Mhm.
was fun. That's kind of why we tap so hard into some of the stereotypes in this game. Just make fun of ourselves, so to speak. But then the concept of just like throwing dice,
Mhm.
we thought that would fit best with the theme, and also just kind of like match up with the type of games that we like to play, where they're a bit more actiony, a bit more skill based, so having to aim and shoot and stuff like that. And I mean, the short end of the story is basically it was the first idea we thought of, and we're like, all
Mhm.
right, we got 48 hours, let's just run with it.
Nice.
But yeah,
But yeah,
the
it's sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say we realized after the build that the doors actually stop the nav mesh,
Mhm.
so the AI is really dumb. It was one of the things we're looking at improving, but they basically only fight you if you're in the same room as them because they can't get to other rooms.
Yeah, I kind of figured that was oh my god, that voice line when you get a crit though. I mean that this is very like have you seen the YouTuber ProZD?
I don't think I have.
Yeah, I
Oh, okay.
haven't.
Well, he's got a bit about how um these repeating voice lines in games. It's just he's a very funny guy. Good voice actor as well. So
Gotcha. Yeah, I was looking back on it. We're like, maybe we shouldn't have that for like if you crit on a D4 because it's like a 1 in 4 chance of that
yeah, I was
line
gonna
playing.
say it's 25% chance of like hearing that same voice line.
Yep. So you'll hear it a lot. It kind of becomes a meme, so to speak.
Hmm. Oh boy. Okay. Well, here's the beautiful thing about audio leveling. I don't have to hear it, but I don't know. Is there like background audio, like music in the game?
There is some music, yeah.
Okay. I guess I have it turned down low that I can only hear the voice audio, but I can't actually hear the music.
Yeah, that was another thing that, there's always more you can add if you have the time, but we had hoped to get like a volume mixer in there for the user. So that way they could, one, master volume, but then also turn down like how loud the dice rolls are, or like voice lines versus sound
Yeah.
effect lines. Because, I mean, we were getting tired of hearing the dice from just playtesting, constantly bouncing, so.
Wow, these
Next
guys
time.
take a lot of hits to kill. Like,
Yeah.
I imagine I'm gonna like they're all gonna die around the same time because I've been just sort of hitting them randomly. There
No,
we
you
go.
you got a little unlucky there when you picked up your second dice. There's a random chance of what it'll be, and you got another D4.
Oh, you can actually get a like higher
Yeah.
value die.
You
Yeah,
can
there was a
get
couple times. Sorry, Shorty, you go.
I was just gonna say you can get a D4, a D6, a D10, a D12, a D20, or a D100.
Oh my god.
Yeah, the
So
game
I got
gets
the lowest
really
possible
easy
value.
if you get a D100.
Okay. Well, it's gonna be a whole lot of me like circle strafing around these guys unless I abuse the doorway trick. So I might do that, and again, with the 25% chance at the critical, I think I'm just going to reduce the game volume for now. Just let the stream background play.
That's fair.
Maybe if I pick up a better die, I can turn it back on. But all right. So can you talk a little bit about the actual? Well, I guess first the actual development process, and then we'll switch over to Ram to talk about the level design process.
Yeah, so let's see, development. One of the first things we did, or I guess I did, is I just made sure that there's a player that could walk and move around the world. That way, when Ram went to go, actually start building the world, he had scale and could see how long it took to get from point A to point B, all that stuff. And then he also had something, of course, to like work on for the animations to get that in and working. If you could move, you could test animations.
Yeah.
So once I got that in, then I moved to just doing the attack because it's our core mechanic. It's having something to attack. So that took a while just to try to figure out the throwing mechanic, make it feel right. And I think after throwing is when I moved on to AI, because if you're gonna have an attack, you gotta have something to kill. And unfortunately, I just didn't get to polish AI as much as I would have liked before I had to bounce other stuff. But that was the main thing, is we basically just looked at, okay, what do we need to have at least something to play, whether or not it's complete or not. And that's how we tried to prioritize things.
And then you can correct me if I'm wrong, Shorty, but didn't you only spend like 2 hours on the AI because we were so close to deadline?
Yeah, it was I watched like one tutorial and I was like, all right, this is what they're gonna be. Because we had plans to have other AI like a ghost in there, and looking back on it, we probably should have done the ghost because their AI would have been a lot more simple to implement. It probably would have just been like a charge-based attack, and then you can stop them if you hit them, and they'll turn around and charge you again. As where the orcs try to take turns attacking you, so to speak.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And so it just doesn't work well because oftentimes they'll just all skip their own attack. So even if you're surrounded by them, you won't get attacked too often. But
it's just like those chipmunks from the Looney Tunes. It's like, no, after you, I insist, after you.
Yeah.
All right. And then, Ram, do you want to talk a little bit about the actual level design process?
Yeah, so we've done some other game jams in the past, and most of the time for those, I'd create everything from scratch within the time of the jam, but we really wanted to try to go a little bit bigger this time, at least for like the time span that we had. So a lot of the assets most of the assets were stuff that we got from different packs. And then for actually putting the level together itself, I tried to, the first little hallway should introduce the players to like, okay, there's doors that you can go into and some stuff that you can pick up. And then just having one enemy so players don't get overwhelmed. Of course, that was before we knew the AI would have trouble with multiple people at once in there. So, and then from there, it was just building out larger rooms. I think the main problem that we ran into was with lighting. Most of the time I build all the lighting, and anytime that I would change something, it would make it difficult for the other guys to go and actually run through the level. But thankfully, they were able to use the unlit mode for that. And then I'm still learning some of the different features of Unreal. So there's some light mapping, like volumes, that unfortunately weren't implemented, that made the build times a bit long for that, but we were able to work around it. Yeah, just a lot of placing little objects one at a time.
So should I be, oh, hello, that's a lot of dudes, okay. Should I be looking to like find other better dye than the one I started with? Like, are they sprinkled around?
There's some in the main room that you missed.
Okay.
They have a little like light on them usually. But yeah, so it's either 5 or 6 that are sprinkled around that you can get
6.
total. Yeah, I think 6. And then there's just coins you can collect as well, just for fun. It was just a quick way for us to implement some sort of score mechanic.
Unfortunately, the coins were a bit late in the development process, so we didn't have time to totally spread those out into the level the way that we would want. But yeah.
So what's the difference between the coins versus the die? How can you tell those apart?
The coins themselves are a little bit bigger, and then the dice is just a little bag. So that's coins there. You can see they stacked coins. I'm watching the stream, so I know I'm a bit behind.
Yeah, it's a bit of a lag.
But then the table in the very front of the room is a bit smaller. It's still a white light that emulates both, but
wow, yeah, I did not notice that as I pick up. Hope I get something more than just a oh, come on, please. There we go. Hey, that looks like a bigger die. Alright, let's see if I can... that one's... I'm dealing 9 damage now. That is doubled my attack with a single die.
Nice.
Alright. So yeah, I'll keep looking out for that now that I know what I'm looking for. Oh, that was actually a full-on icosahedron. Wow.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think the blue ones are D20s.
Yeah.
Yeah, then there's a couple of...
much faster now.
Yep.
Oh, good. There's a couple of extra die near the door.
Yeah, the boss door.
Okay.
Let's see, what else?
I'll keep looking around for those. But how did you actually construct the space? Like, were you just sort of building it as you went, or did you have like a paper prototype first, or how'd you approach that?
Yeah, so originally I did do a very, very rough little sketch for Shorty so we could design, okay, how far are we wanting to go with this? What sort of either puzzle or different platforming features do we want in here? Because originally there was a little bit more of a plan to have some of that sort of stuff. So there was a very, very rough 2D sort of drawing. And then past that, I'm a big fan of large open spaces, contrasted with some smaller, more enclosed spaces for the player to go through. So, I would start out with a broad idea of, okay, this space needs to be X amount large, just in my head, and then start to build like, okay, so here's a pillar that's going to define how tall the ceiling's going to be. Here's the general layout of like the floor to design how like wide it's going to be. For the maze bits, I would sometimes go and just put out the flooring to go and understand, okay, so these are the paths that the player can take, and these are where I need to build out different rooms. And then we've done something somewhat similar before for a VR game that we did for a game jam. And what I learned from that one, thankfully that one we had more time. But what I learned from that one was I should go and make some more prefabs of some of the rooms. So that helped out a lot with being able to actually stick the rooms or get as many rooms in. so I could just drag and drop in those prefabs of rooms.
All right. Well, yeah. I just wanted to say quickly, hello, Lurk Not a Lie, and yeah, the game is like this feels like a really large space. Like I know you said that you're like reusing some of the rooms as just prefabs, but it is still like, oh, I can't go in there. There, that's the room of ragdolls right now.
Yeah. We thankfully we're smart enough to realize that could be an issue, and we just kill the enemies after a couple seconds go by.
Is it also possible, like in Unity, you can very easily just like disable the physics layer interaction? Is it possible to do something like that in Unreal as well?
Yeah, it's not too bad to do something like that. So in the future, for when enemies die, we'll probably still ragdoll them, and then I'll probably make it so the capsule that surrounds them, because each character has like its own capsule that helps with like movement and stuff, and then there's obviously the skeletal mesh collision. I'm gonna look into just disabling the capsule part but leaving the body part, and then just lowering the mass, so that way the player can just kind of push them out of the way.
Yeah.
And then probably do some sort of like dissolve effect, because just so we can have cleanups and don't have a bunch of dead bodies taking up RAM.
Yeah. I guess a lot of these rooms are just kind of quote unquote monster closets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we tried to put items in a few rooms, but it was like what the last hour or two of the game jam is when we were like, the items were completed, and we're just like, okay, throwing them into the map, and then we're worried about performance a bit, so we're trying not to kill performance by adding too many items, and balance too is a thing.
Yeah, part of the problem was with the version management software we're using. When someone's in the level editing something, only one person can be in there editing at a time. So Shorty was in there going and finalizing the AI for the enemies. I'm like, well, I would love to put coins in, but the AI for enemies is a bit more important.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can see, like, because the AI is actually constructed in the scene, because you're like making the nav mesh and stuff.
Yeah, so the nav mesh is part of the scene, but then the enemies themselves are like their own. In Unreal, we have blueprints, so Unity equivalent is like a prefab. Yeah, so they have their own that, and I would test their behavior in my own map, but then actually placing them in the map where they are, I'd have to check out the map and lock it from everyone else, so that I could place the enemies in here. And I also had to do the code at the beginning to correctly play all those audio loops, and lock the player in place and get the tutorial set up, and so that was near the end of what I was doing. I think enemies were dropped in in that like 2 hours time span right before the jam ended. We just kind of throw them down and say, cross the fingers and say, I hope that's enough or not too much.
Yeah, we had
thankfully
a couple.
They're pretty dumb, so probably could have put in more, but just fine.
On the other hand, like the amount of dice you have to throw to kill them is so variable that if it had been much more than this, like if I hadn't gotten a d20 as my third die, like it would have been a little crazy making.
That's one of the mechanics we hope to change in the future when we keep working on it. But we can talk about that more later if you want, or now.
Yeah, sure.
It really doesn't matter.
Serpentine, gotta give me that dice bag. Here we go. All right, what did I get this time? Just trying to find my way to the other side of a door so I can turn around and kill the massive horde that is like started coming towards me. All right, this closet is where we make our stand. I think that's a D100. Oh my god, that's gonna deal so much damage.
Yeah, that'll be good.
It's a big golden die.
Yeah, one of the that's gonna leave a mark voice line is, I should have looking back on it, just tapped it into whatever dice was the highest. So if you had a D20, you ignore a D4 if you get a 4.
That's a good idea.
But again, it's one of those things you don't realize until you play a whole bunch, and you're like, well, we don't have the time.
Yeah. So I think the other idea is like starting out with a D4, and then every time you find something, upgrading it to a higher level, rather than each time you find one, it's just a random probability of what the strength of the die is.
Yeah, that would work as well.
Originally, we had planned on having like, oh, you can have like fire dice or frost dice, and you can choose between them. but putting in the whole asset management system there seemed like a bit too much.
Yeah. It was one of those things where I was comfortable doing it from a coding perspective, but then if we do that, we also have to have some sort of UI or some sort of effects so the player is aware of what's happening.
Yeah.
And also give them the option to select between those two.
Yeah.
So while simple in concept, we realized pretty quickly that would just increase our scope way too much for the time that we had.
Yeah.
So we just went with the simple, you find a dice, it's a random one that'll get added to you.
Yeah, and we had a couple of fairly major stumbling blocks or like problems during development that sucked up big amounts of both Shorty and my time. Or if we hadn't had those, we might have been able to go and do a bit more with it. But
yeah,
it is what it is.
What ended up happening?
You want to go first with yours, or you want me to take it?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know. I still haven't entirely figured out whether it was a problem with my blend file or what, but I could not, for the life of me, get animations to bake onto the rig to import. So I spent at least 8 hours on Saturday for the jam, if not maybe 10, just getting in one animation. And so that was a huge time sink on my part. So I would have been able to do a lot more art for the game and fill out some different things a lot better. And then I think, Shorty, for you, it was with the aiming mechanic.
Yeah, so with aim, we didn't have the reticle there for a while, and it was just hard to see where you're going to hit. So we added that. I think it'd be all of a sudden a lot easier. But then we realized a lot was happening where like it hits perfectly at exactly like 10 meters in front of you. But if the enemy's directly in front of you, you would like shoot over them. So you'd like throw it over their head. And so it took a long time to try to figure it out. At first I was just playing with physics and being like, okay, well, gravity will bring it down some. So if I apply this much force, what's that going to look like? And I quote unquote handcrafted that arc based off the force. But then that's when I ran into that issue of like, oh, it hits perfectly at 10 meters out from you, but any closer or further away, you're missing. And that, as a player, you can adjust that a bit by aiming up and being like, oh, I'm going to shoot a little further now. But it sucked when you're being chased and you're throwing them at them and you're right in front of you and you just missed.
Yeah.
So thankfully, though, by complete accident, it's kind of one of Unreal's things. The joke I have is there's a checkbox for that in Unreal. And I just happen to find a node that if you give it a start position and an end position, it'll calculate the arc, and you can change the angle of that arc. And then you just take that vector that it spits out and use it as your force to whatever you're doing. So thankfully, once I found that node, it was just a matter of doing some ray casting to basically figure out what I'm looking at, and then using that as like our end position, and then the start position being from the hand where you actually throw. So it ended up just being a lot of math that I was trying to tinker with by trial and error at first, and then eventually I found a node that did it for me.
Oh, I guess this would be the like ending voice lines of the game, but unfortunately I've got it muted for now, so
yeah. So this is just the narrator talks now, kind of wrapping up the story. And I believe it'll eventually go back to the main menu.
Yeah, and plus I believe in this version we have an internal build that fixes this, but in this version the enemies will talk over the narrator if you have any of them left inside there. So people can go and listen to the clean version themselves, I guess.
Yeah.
Same with the music. The boss music keeps playing, so you'll have like a narrator trying to listen to, and this epic boss music playing, and the random voice lines from orcs still triggering. That was a thing we fixed like after we got some sleep.
Yeah, for sure. So by the way, Ram, how did you end up overcoming the issue with the animations not baking properly? Because that sounds like it'd be really helpful for other people to know what you did, what was wrong.
So the way that I was trying to do it, because I was trying to use a lot of pre-built assets and stuff. I work professionally as a 3D model artist and mostly just a 3D model artist. So animations, I can do some from scratch, but they take a really long time. So I was just going to use some Mixamo stuff and retarget it in Blender, which is my program of choice. Um, and so I tried a couple different methods originally to go and like, okay, I'm going to have one skeletal mesh like copy another skeletal mesh and do offsets, so bone rotations and whatnot are all fixed for. And then I'll just go and bake the skeletal mesh that we're using out. But none of the bakes would use. I would point it instead of a skeletal mesh towards like objects that were then pointed towards a skeletal mesh, and that wouldn't work. So what I ended up having to do was by hand go and copy the rotation, like every 10 or so frames of the animation that I wanted, onto the skeletal mesh.
Oof.
Yeah, that didn't feel good after like 6 to 7 hours of fiddling with the other method. But doing it that way, having the actual keyframes on the mesh that I was trying to export did get it to finally bake. Now, granted, I really am thinking that it was something in that blend file that was wrong, because I've had it in the past, like his falling animation. That's an animation I did previously, and that does sort of copy the location of some other physical objects just to like do some of the IK systems, right? Um, so I'm not entirely sure what the issue is there, but if someone else is having trouble, last resort, just put it on the skeletal mesh,
Oh
and
no.
that should work. But I would I would not do what I did and instead just open up a new blend file. Or maybe try a
Gotcha.
different version or something.
Oof. Well, yeah. Just with regards to like only one person being able to work on the level, um, I feel like there is something you can do. For instance, in Unity, and this might be more trouble to set up than it's necessarily worth, but in Unity you can load like scenes or maps additively. So I could imagine there being a sort of base mesh for the level, which is just like a gray box version that everyone agrees, like, okay, we're not touching this anymore. And then one person can create a scene where they are using that mesh as a reference and populating it with decoration and items. And then another person is placing in the enemy AI and doing the baking and stuff like that. So that would be kind of like a way to work around the idea of allowing each person to still work in their own scene file, and then when the game loads, you just slot all those on top of each other. Or maybe there's a way, like, um, there's a way to actually get it to like merge those scene files together once you decide like, okay, we don't need these to all be separate things anymore. Just an idea I thought of. I have no idea if that would work or not.
Yeah, so we just didn't have the time to really look into it over the 48 hours because we've never used it. But Unreal 5 specifically just added like world partitions. So you can
Oh.
basically check out chunks of your map. So like quadrants. So that's something we could have done. But more easily, they actually have now a new system you can tap into that's basically one file per actor is kind of what they call it. So, and the way it works currently is a level is just, it's called a UMap. So it's just a single binary file. And with the, if you tap into the one file per actor, you basically can select your hierarchy of all the items in the level and say, hey, this is going to make this a one file per actor file. And then it'll create like a temp folder for you, and you can check out those items. And now you can leave the map open, and the map itself just knows to, hey, for this item, go look in this specific folder location.
Interesting.
So it's something we'll probably look into in the future, because in that case, what I could have done, for example, is I could have thrown in all the enemies into the map, checked out the map very briefly, and then converted all those enemies to one file per actor, and then moved them around, placed them wherever I wanted to, while Matt, worked on lighting or something.
Right.
So UE5 does now have some stuff to work around that. It was just we've never personally used it, because
Mhm.
we're still transitioning to 5 after tinkering around with 4.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, 48 hours, we'll just go with what we know.
Yeah, and I think that's a good call. Like at the end of the day, you have to use the methods that are working in the context of a game jam, even if it's not fast or efficient or whatever. It's just like it's what works. It's what we got time for.
Yeah, that was I know. Joker, the other person who was doing a lot of our audio, reached out to me at one point. It's like, hey, how do I add music? How do I like make the music change when we enter the boss room?
Mhm.
And it's like 3 a.m. at the time, and I'm like deep into my own code. I'm like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. Never do this again. It's terrible practice.
Yep.
But I had basically like told them to like create an audio component on that main boss door, and we slapped both the music files on that door, and just change it when the door opens because we have a little Boolean check there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if our door dies for whatever reason, we lose music. And it was just one of those classic hacky solutions to get done for a game jam that you would never do in like a real game.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
But it worked.
Absolutely, yeah. All right. Well, do you have can you talk about the plans that you have for the game going forward? Because you said you did mention earlier that you wanted to come back and make some changes to it.
Yeah, so there's a few changes we want to make. We like the core concept of like throwing dice, but we overall want to do, looking back on it and just kind of the feedback we've got, is probably extend the campaign to be about an hour or two long. So more story, more enemies, more AI, fix up our animations, all that generic stuff, the polish. But then the core mechanic will probably switch over to be the concept of more of you pick up a dice bag, and in that might be 3d6, or you might have like a 1d20, and now the user has to decide, hey, do I want to throw a 1d20 that would give users, give me more max damage but have less average damage than 3d6 would, or do I just want to be consistent with my damage and go with like a 3d6? So that's kind of the mechanic we think we're going to switch to kind of give the player more strategy in their playthrough. So of course that comes with a lot of UI changes and all that to make it match. But that's the generics of what we hope to do. Basically, take this game, improve on it, change a little bit of the mechanics and how they work. We hope to add multiplayer just because we think games are more fun when you play with a friend, but we also know that's a huge hurdle. So that's the gist of it. We hope to basically create a short little game and then eventually release it. Learn a lot from it, use whatever we can learn to build for the next project.
Nice. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, especially and basically anything goes if you are treating a game as a learning experience. Like as long as you are creating something that you are going to be happy with the end product, and there's a lot of value in finding out what it takes to actually get a game to the quote unquote finished product stage. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Like right now I'm working on like an interact system, and I'm like, this will work in like any game. So if I get this working here, next game I can just and pop it into it. So doing a lot of that, just learning, and in low expectations for how it would do if we release, but the main goal is to learn a lot.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, if you do end up making a post-gen version, you would like my feedback on anything as you end up progressing that, then I'd be more than happy to take a look at it.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. We actually have a question coming in from Lurk Nautilai about how much of this was C++ versus written in blueprints.
Blueprint. For this jam specifically, it was almost entirely blueprint. It was just a little bit faster to iterate through that. For the changes I'm making to it now, it's probably going to be closer to 50-50. Just because there's some stuff you can do in Blueprint to set up base classes. Some stuff you can do in C++ to set up base classes.
Yeah.
That you just can't in Blueprint.
Gotcha. All right. Well, if anyone has any other questions they'd like to ask, now's the time to do it. But otherwise, do you have any? Well, I guess it sounds like this is the main project that you'd like people to check out. But anything from before that you want people to take a look at?
I don't think so. This is the main one. Other projects we've worked on in the past just kind of stopped where they stopped. But this is going to be our main baby, so to speak, for, I don't know, the next 6 months.
Sounds good. And then how about any social media channels that people can follow you on?
Yeah. The main one we have right now is just Reddit.
Mhm.
I just put the link in there. We will eventually have a Twitter and like a YouTube and all that fun stuff. It's just right now we only got the Reddit. So when we eventually get all those other ones, we'll probably put the link there.
Sounds good. Oh, interesting. Look, Not Alive's mentioning it's the first time I used live coding this jam, and it was faster than the normal recompile and relaunch.
Yeah, so the hot reload, I always have trouble getting it to work, so I almost always kill Unreal Engine, and then I build my C++ code, and then I just relaunch the U project. But yeah, so I think they're working on making it faster. Yeah, live coding in UE5. So definitely something I'm gonna be looking into, because the faster you can iterate through your changes, usually the simpler things go.
Absolutely. Like, it might not be great that a lot of the time I find myself programming in a very like guess and check kind of way. Like I will try to reason through something, but if it's just like like what is going on here? I'm just gonna keep trying different values until something makes sense or breaks it in a way that reveals the problem. And I get into that guess and check mode, and it's like every time I have to wait for stuff to recompile and relaunch, it's like this is taking forever.
Yeah.
Hot reload is discouraged. Live coding is the new thing. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. But no, it was a fun jam. We're glad to finally catch back up on our sleep.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. So, like, how much time of the overall jam do you feel like you spent on this?
I probably only got about 6 hours of sleep during that chunk of time, maybe. Let's see, well, Friday night was a late night, but not too extreme, and then Saturday into Sunday was an all-nighter. And then it was very similar for Ram and Joker. But then during the it was a good chunk. We probably used about anywhere between 35 to 40 hours each for us working on it.
Yeah.
Good lord.
Yeah, it was rough, but we're proud of what we got. So
good.
Can't say I would do it again this weekend, but give it a couple months.
Yeah.
Might consider it.
Yeah.
I know the feeling. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the channel to do the interview. It's been a lot of fun. And
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, as you progress and make more like work in progress versions, as I said before, please feel free to send it my way.
Yeah,
Will do.
Thank you.
All right. Bye for now.